Holy hell, guys, was there any implication that I wasn't going to review the latest Sonic game in the franchise? The day I stop reviewing Sonic games is the day I either review the very last one I haven't looked at, or if I become a billionaire. Nope, still not a billionaire. Anyway, for today, folks, we're going to be looking at both the Wii U version and 3DS version of Sonic Lost World. Are both good games? Is one clearly better than the other? Should you even waste your time to begin with? Let's find out now. And seeing that a lot of you guys are looking forward to this video, I can only hope I give you the answer you were seeking. Well now, my very first review of a game on the Nintendo Wii U. A lot of you were probably expecting a review of Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transform before heading into Sonic Lost World, but I'm going to be perfectly honest here, I barely touched this game and I've owned it for nearly a year. I don't mean to say it's bad, I just haven't had the time to sit down and play it. Sonic Lost World definitely holds a much bigger priority because it's the next mainstream Sonic title. With that said, this game utterly terrified me when I saw the very first trailer back in May of this year. It's been 2 years since the release of Sonic Generations, and considering that game's success, I was not expecting them to change things up so soon. The tubular level design, the complete lack of the boost gameplay that Sonic's been using for a while now, the return of Wisps from Sonic Colors, this game was sending me all kinds of different messages and I didn't know what to make of it until the day it finally came out in North America. Some of you guys may already know what I think of this game, but I've played the game, both of them, a few more times since those videos, and I carefully took a lot of notes for this one. I haven't felt this way about a Sonic game since Sonic Unleashed back in 2008. Well, let's start with that plot first, shall we? By the way, if you're just joining in, first off, welcome. It's glad to have you here, but I'm spoiling this story rotten. It's not much to begin with, but I figured a warning should be stated regardless. Sonic and Tails are seen chasing after Dr. Eggman, who is carrying that oh-so-nostalgic animal capsule from the classic series. To get the two heroes off of his back, Eggman releases the capsule with Sonic and Tails immediately dashing towards it. Eggman uses this opening to damage the tornado, causing the two to make an emergency landing on this convenient hexagonal planet that Tails recognizes as the Lost Hex. Just what is this place exactly? We're never told. It's simply the setting of this game's plot. After running around for a bit, Sonic runs into Eggman once again, only this time he has company in the form of the Deadly Six, a group of bad guys who exist solely to be this game's bad guys. I apologize if that sounds like a lazy description, but these guys come out of fucking nowhere with no explanation given, and spoiler warning, when you kick their asses in the end, they just anticlimactically disappear. Sonic Lost World's story overall is almost painfully simple and by the numbers. The Deadly Six want nothing but the destruction of the world because that's their job, and Sonic needs to stop them. That's about it. It has its moments, and I actually think the writing is pretty good when it comes to character interactions, but when it comes to looking at the Deadly Six individually, they're all dreadfully one-dimensional, and when the spotlight is solely on them, you just want them to shut up so we can get a move on to the next stage. At one point, the Deadly Six betray Eggman when Sonic destroys the magic conch shell that Eggman was using to keep them in line, which leads to a temporary team-up of Sonic and Eggman, but it's just that, temporary. The Deadly Six plan on destroying the world by sucking up all the world's energy via a machine built by Dr. Eggman. When the Deadly Six are all defeated, Eggman takes the spot of the main villain just in time for the sort of climax, with Sonic sending Eggman's ass into orbit once more in a boss fight that's somehow easier than the final boss in Sonic Colors. Sonic takes a nap and we're left wondering just what exactly was his plot trying to accomplish in the first place. Again, this story is nothing special, and while I don't play Sonic games for plot to begin with, even when it's constantly thrown into your face in other games, I just couldn't help but notice how lacking it was this time around. Oh well. Time for the gameplay, the part I was most curious about since I first caught a glimpse of it a few months ago. As you may know, the boost formula has been completely scrapped and we're sort of back to the adventure formula again. Sonic can spin dash with the left trigger, perform a double jump like in Sonic Colors, and once again has access to the homing attack. Now for the differences, Sonic now has a run button. Yep, you heard that right, a run button. If you only move Sonic by just tilting the analog stick, the fastest you're going to get is a sort of uncomfortable jog. With the run button held down, Sonic will transition into a figure 8, where his real running speed resides. The idea of giving Sonic two distinctive speeds was apparently implemented to give players a better sense of control. Personally, I thought the Adventure series did that just fine, but when it comes to this game, I think it works overall. I mean, there's rarely a time when I'm not holding down the run button. In fact, I think I'll only let that son of a bitch go during 2D sections, but still, constantly running from place to place never led me to unfair deaths or major issues with the level design, so there's no problem with Sonic's overall control to me. The homing attack can now target multiple enemies at once, and when it's performed, Sonic travels in a noticeable arc, which I'm not sure why that happens in the first place. Seeing Sonic destroy a group of enemies with only one push of a button for me is honestly a bit off-putting. Was the homing attack really something that needed to be simplified? Besides that, Sonic can also do a kick attack with a different button, which is used to take down bigger threats or enemies that simply shrug off a simple homing attack. However, the homing attack in of itself can also be charged. If you keep the lock-on cursor on the enemy for a certain amount of time, the attack reticle will start building up, and when maxed out, it can take out even the most resilient of robots. This sort of makes the kick kind of pointless to begin with, but what's really puzzling is trying to charge up the damn attack in the first place. Now, I'm not sure whether it's because some enemies are simply immune to it or need to be kicked first or just dodgy programming in general, but throughout my adventure, I counted a number of times where I wanted to use the charged homing attack, but the lock-on cursor would either just not show up in the first place, or would sporadically charge when it felt like it when it did show up. Perhaps I'm doing something wrong, but when it comes to the game's new mechanics, the game itself doesn't do a very good job in teaching you how things work. Every once in a while, a prompt will appear that requires the player to outright stop what they're doing to pause the game and touch the notification located on the gamepad to learn how to perform a certain action. Teaching players via this method, to me, is a complete pace breaker. In the older games, a simple run into a notification was enough to learn about how something works, and sometimes other games will just automatically tell you how to utilize a feature without breaking the immersion. But with this clunky utilization of the Wii U's gamepad, players now have to go out of their way to learn how to work the new homing attack, the kick, the spin dash, or the newly implemented parkour feature. When Sonic runs into a wall with any sort of momentum, he'll automatically cling to it and keep the pace going. If you're running alongside a wall, you can jump to the wall parallel to it, assuming there's one to begin with, and if you're running up a wall, you can reach ledges and heights a simple jump will not let you reach. When you get the hang of it, I think the parkour system can be fun at times. When I'm using it in 3D, it can be cool. When I'm using it in 2D, it could either be the means to take a shortcut or be the bane of my existence. There's nothing more annoying than having Sonic cling onto a wall you didn't want him to cling onto in the first place, all because you got close to it with a little bit of speed. It's because of this that I don't often hold the run button down in 2D sections, especially in vertical shafts, because the parkour system will make me do things I had no intention of doing in the first place. The only way you're really going to figure out how to use parkour to begin with is via experimentation, because again, the game doesn't really tell you how it works. The only time I got an idea from the game itself was when I was already running up a wall to begin with, and even then, the hit itself was rather vague. It was by complete accident that I found out that Sonic could hop left or right when running on a wall to turn corners or climb horizontally, because besides these rings going in a direction that made me curious, nothing told me I could do so. However, while the parkour system in general can be unstable, it is for the most part completely optional. I think there were only 2 times throughout the entire adventure that it was mandatory, and even then the sections were small and not very life-threatening. The level design regularly offers Sonic a different way to reach the next checkpoint or the animal capsule located at the end of each stage. Which leads us to the levels themselves. There are a total of 7 worlds for Sonic to explore, with each area containing 4 stages apiece. The level themes have gotten a bit more, how should I say, traditional? The first area is a grassy hill theme, the second area is a desert theme, the third area is beach theme, the fourth area is a frozen theme, the fifth area is jungle theme, the sixth area is sky theme, and the final area is volcano themed. Sound familiar? Okay, look, if you want to start comparing this game to Mario, you go right ahead. This game is pretty much asking for it in the first place. Are there similarities? Of course there are, but this game doesn't have nearly the amount of focus on gravity-based platforming as Super Mario Galaxy. In fact, I can't really tell what Sonic Lost World's focus is. This game will have Sonic do all sorts of things depending on the level, of course. In one level, Sonic has to conquer an obstacle course as a snowball. In another level, he has to play pinball to get to the next area. One level has him on autopilot where he can't stop running and suffers instant death if he runs into a wall, kinda like the mock speed sections in Sonic 06. There are times where Sonic has to defy physics altogether and glide through the air with painfully awkward flying controls, and other times he has to guide fruits with giant blenders. There are level-specific gimmicks, and then there's having absolutely no idea how to properly flesh out the adventure with strong, cohesive level design. Why do I have to be a snowball here? Why can't I stop running here? What's the point of the flying levels to begin with? Whatever happened to focusing on one gameplay style and fleshing it out to make something that gamers will love to replay over and over again? This game just reeks of experimentation, and I think it suffers because of it. Let's get this over with now. I don't really like the emphasis of cylindrical level design here, because with a character as fast as Sonic, it can be disorienting at times. Yeah, it can offer a different experience depending on where you take Sonic at the beginning of the tube, but if we're talking multiple pathways here, I'd rather have it like the adventure games or Generations, where it was all about exploring to find those extra pathways and being rewarded for doing so. Not all levels are tubular, but there are occasions where the level design can be very broad and not very interesting. I noticed it the most with stages like inside Desert Ruins and Frozen Factory. Where are the slopes, the hills, the branching pathways, the standard stuff that made good Sonic level design what it was? I do like a good chunk of the levels for the most part, and I always enjoy my time with the likes of Tropical Coast. However, there are times where it sure doesn't feel like I'm playing a Sonic game. This feels the most apparent when I'm traveling in a 2D section, which I'll just say right now are my least favorite part about this game. Compared to the 2D sections in Sonic Unleashed, Sonic Colors, and Sonic Generations, this feels like an awkward mishmash between classic 2D Sonic and 2D modern Sonic. Even with the run button held down, Sonic's jump just feels sluggish, and sometimes his inertia fluctuates with no warning. Sometimes I make a far jump just by letting Sonic go with the flow, and sometimes I have to jam the analog stick forward to make sure Sonic doesn't drop like a blue rock. Combined with the 2D parkour issue I mentioned earlier, the 2D sections often bring the pace and general flow of the game down for me. Returning from Sonic Colors are Wisps, which act as power-ups you can use to bypass certain challenges, which is of course assuming you can get some of them to work in the first place. This game really wants you to use the Wii U's gamepad, and I guess they figured the Wisps were the perfect candidates to do so, because other than that, there's really no reason for these guys to be here in the first place. Now, you can actually control the likes of the returning laser and drill wisp with the control stick, but the game doesn't tell you that you can do that. Other wisps like the returning rocket wisp, the new asteroid wisp, the eagle wisp, and the rhythm wisp all need to utilize the gamepad's touchpad or gyroscope feature. The rocket wisp is easy enough to handle, and the asteroid wisp is okay when you just don't give a fuck about anything, but the likes of the eagle wisp and the highly questionable bomb wisp just plain suck. Even when I was dead centered in front of my TV, the Eagle Wisp had a mind of its own that only obeyed my commands when it felt like it. This is one I generally tend to avoid, and I don't even know how to fucking use the Bomb Wisp. Okay, what was that? What exactly is the point of the Rhythm Wisp? You touch certain areas to have Sonic go there. Okay, and then what? Oh, it's done. I don't get it, what? Motherfucker. Ugh, asshole. Anyway, the Wisps are okay, they're optional, but because you have to use the gamepad for a majority of them, I feel they just serve to break the immersion. Definitely not as fun to use as in Sonic Colors. I actually would have liked to see the game go a bit more classic in terms of power-ups located in stages. Every once in a while after completing a stage, and especially when you have the Miiverse function turned on, you're rewarded with an item capsule that you can use by tapping the briefcase icon on the touchpad. You can hold a total of 5 items at a time. It could be 10 rings, invincibility, an electric shield, but to be honest, because I had to go out of my way to stop what I was doing to touch the briefcase to activate these capsules, I'd often forget that I had these items to begin with. When I'm playing the game, my eyes are glued to the TV screen, not on the gamepad. This is why I think it would have helped to have these items spread out in the levels via monitors, like the good old days, you know? In fact, the 3DS version of the game does just that, but we'll get more into that version later. But even the likes of the classic power-ups won't exactly prepare yourself for what's probably one of Sonic's most difficult adventures in some time. And don't worry, I don't mean the likes of Ghost and Goblin's Heart or anything like that, but this game will test you, and I mean it will fucking test you. If it's not the likes of dealing with Frozen Factory's wonderful ice physics and the problems it brings along with it, it's the death-filled areas of Sky Road and the despicable instant death moments in Lava Mountain Act 2. After playing the game enough times, I found that if you simply go from point A to point B without trying to be fancy, or by not caring about exploring that often, then the journey should be a reasonably comfortable experience. However, the moment your curious side emerges and decides to go after things like, say, the returning red rings, then prepare to see this screen an immeasurable amount of times. Sonic Lost World is quite the stingy bitch when it comes to extra lives. Not even collecting 100 rings grants you additional lives anymore, making sequences when you're rewarded with a fuckload of rings feel completely unfulfilling. Collecting all the red rings pretty much requires mastery of the game's parkour system, complete with a ton of do-or-die situations, which always does a great job in infuriating me. I hate situations where I only have one shot of getting a specific red ring, or else I'm going to have to die to try again, or restart the entire level in the case of Frozen Factory Act 2, and especially Lava Mountain Act 2. During my first playthrough of this game, I found myself grinding lives on about 4 separate occasions, topping off at about 45 lives each time, and spending each and every single one of them. This game makes you fucking work for these little things, and for what? Chaos Emeralds and Circus Tents. Each time you collect all the red rings in an area, you get a Chaos Emerald. Collect all 7 and you get Supersonic. Is it worth it? In my opinion, no. Supersonic is great and all, but there have been less strenuous ways to unlock him. Circus Tents are little mini-games you can unlock by collecting a certain amount of red rings in a specific area. You play these to collect a whole lot of animals, which you need a certain amount to unlock the final act in an area. You can collect animals normally by destroying enemies, finishing levels, or by busting open these miniature capsules that are all over the place. Thing is, it takes forever if you decide to do it this way. Circuses, when played properly, can give you a huge payoff, so if you play your cards right, then the animal quota you need to fulfill for every area should be a non-issue. If you want my advice on the ideal Sonic Lost World experience, play the levels like you normally would and only collect the red rings that are in plain sight. With the circuses you unlock, you'll not only fulfill the amount needed to reach the next area, but you'll never have to put up with the bullshit of trying to nail specific hard to collect red rings. The amount of death, frustration, and stress I experienced on my first playthrough was almost incomprehensible, but that's only because I decided to go after all the red rings as I progressed through each stage. When I decided to start a new game after beating the game once, I had a much more comfortable time just going from stage to stage and only collecting red rings I can get with ease. I know it's all a matter of the player, but I will never forget the misery that was my first playthrough of Sonic Lost World. I mean, if your first experience of a video game is very hit and miss to begin with, what exactly compels you to go back and try again? The time attack mode, which ranks you like the previous games have done? The multiplayer races where one player looks at the TV screen while the other player looks at the gamepad? Or maybe it's those RC toys that a second player can control that aren't that remarkable except for the stealth fighter. In my case, well, I'm reviewing the game, and it's only because of that I discovered that Sonic Lost World was a game that was noticeably better on the second and third run when you know how to avoid the bullshit. Look, I'm not calling the game terrible overall, but it definitely feels like a step backwards from what we had previously. I can say that aesthetically the game is freaking gorgeous. The smooth 60 frames per second and vibrant color choice really makes the game pop, and the soundtrack is once again pretty sweet. But what does great graphics and sound mean when my gameplay experience was all over the place? At its best, Sonic Lost World for the Wii U is simply okay for me. At its worst, it's something I don't ever want to revisit. Like Sonic Unleashed, this game feels like an experiment of what works for Sonic in terms of level design, platforming gimmicks, and organization. I can only hope that future games in the lineup learn from this and build upon what worked in Sonic Lost World, while removing all the shit that didn't. To cap off a look at the Wii U version, there's the Nights into Dreams bonus level that people who purchased the game when it came out can download and experience. It's not that very long, something that should only take you about 5 to 8 minutes to complete, but I will say that it is a nice little love letter to fans of both Sonic the Hedgehog and Nights. You're not missing much overall, but it's cool to see Sega acknowledge another franchise that has a following. However, there's still the matter of the 3DS version, which coincided with the release of the Wii U version. Is this another Sonic Generations 3DS, something that was made on the cheap just to have a handheld version of a game on a system that more people were likely to own compared to the Wii U?
The answer is yes and no.
Sonic Lost World on the 3DS, like its HD counterpart, is a platforming adventure game that also has its mix of 2D action every once in a while. It's also Sonic's first 3D adventure on a handheld, so yeah, about fucking time. Fundamentally, it's very much like the console game, 7 worlds to conquer with 4 acts apiece, though the 3DS version of the game keeps things together in a more traditional sense that you would expect from a Sonic game. For one thing, notifications and tutorials are handled in a better fashion here. Question marks are clearly visible, and the information given does a great job in informing the player how certain mechanics work, including the charged homing attack and the parkour system in general. In fact, some would argue that the parkour system is better implemented here than in the HD game, but I wouldn't necessarily agree with that entirely. Sonic's homing attack doesn't have that weird arc to it like in the Wii U version, but the multi-targeting aspect is still there, and sometimes it can cause me to lose my footing in certain areas when Sonic automatically homes in on a target I never had any intention of attacking in the first place. Power-ups and wisps can be located throughout each stage, though like Sonic Colors on the Wii, you need to complete certain stages before being able to use a certain wisp in previous stages. Graphically, Sonic Lost World on the 3DS is okay, but this definitely isn't the best the 3DS can offer. Super Mario 3D Land looks better than this, and the game has its moments of pop-up and other distracting graphical oddities. Okay then, so what's the problem with this version? One thing. One major thing. The level design. It starts off with so much promise too. The first 2 zones, Windy Hill and Desert Ruin, start off as simple pick-up-and-play zones that I believe almost everyone can enjoy without much trouble. As soon as we head into Tropical Coast, the first issue of the level design starts to slowly reveal its ugly self. The levels start getting too fucking long. As soon as we reach Frozen Factory, then the levels start getting really fucking long. Levels get tiring, you'll begin to get hand cramps, you'll become easily agitated, and then that's where the second issue of the level design will begin to take its course. The shit the game requires you to do to complete certain levels. Not just certain tasks, but also the repetition of it all. It forces you to stop all of the damn time to flick switches, kill a certain amount of enemies, or deal with awkward controls for certain power-ups. Just when you want the level to end, that little notification on the bottom screen just serves as a painful reminder of how much you actually have left to complete. When you think the level's about to end, it goes on for another 6 minutes. This isn't even including the numerous do-or-die situations the second half of the game is plagued with. Tons of areas where using parkour over bottomless pits is mandatory, a shitload of areas where wisp powers is mandatory to complete levels or die trying, and did I mention that some levels take a really fucking long time? Frozen Factory Act 3, for the love of God, who thought this level was good? Having to constantly push snowballs into holes more times than you can count, an extremely annoying snowball creature that begins to follow you after a few minutes in, that freezes you on contact, as well as having the potential to destroy the snowballs needed to proceed with the level. And of course, the level itself just goes on and on and on. And how about those special stages? Getting Chaos Emeralds requires that Sonic finish the level with at least 50 rings, just like Sonic 1. To collect the Emerald, Sonic needs to fly around in this open area and collect enough orbs before time runs out. It's kinda like the special stages in Sonic 3, in some way I can't exactly describe. Now, if you're wondering why it looks like Sonic is floating awkwardly like a dumbass, it's because you control Sonic with a 3DS gyroscope feature, something I can't exactly utilize at the moment, because recording footage from my 3DS requires that I strap the son of a bitch down with wires that prevent me from twisting or turning my 3DS up and down and all around. But being unable to record the special stages is not the reason why they're bad. The fact that you have to use the gyroscope controls in the first place is the reason why they're bad. You aim where Sonic goes by using the gyroscope. You can't use the analog stick or anything else to change Sonic's altitude. Seeing that the special stages are completely three-dimensional in terms of where Sonic can go, not to mention the structure of the special stages in of themselves, you are going to tilt and turn and spin in all sorts of ways. You're going to look like a damn fool, and call it me impressed if you somehow avoid getting dizzy or suffer any shoulder cramps from all the damn spinning. It's for that reason, and that reason alone, that I consider these special stages to be the absolute worst special stages in Sonic history. Oh yeah, worse than the Emerald Racing in Sonic Heroes, it's just that obnoxious. I could applaud the developers for trying something different, but this is the wrong kind of different. The 3DS version of Sonic Lost World, without a doubt, has more focus than the Wii U version of the game, but that focus consists of marathon levels, an insane amount of monotony, and too many instances of trial and error. Between these two, the Wii U version is the superior title in my opinion. While the Wii U version may lack consistency and have level gimmicks that I'm not exactly comfortable with, it doesn't fucking drag like the 3DS version of the game. It starts out fine for me, and then it just nosedives into an area I don't want to go into, and it's a damn shame. If you like your Sonic levels to be long and don't care for the horrible special stages, I sure as hell didn't, then you just might find some enjoyment in Sonic Lost World for the 3DS. I gotta say, I'm not really surprised that I ended up having mixed feelings for Sonic Lost World. Again, ever since the first trailer back in May, I had inconsistent thoughts until the day came where I was finally able to play the game myself when it officially launched here in America. Back in my Sonic 06 review, and I mean the most recent one, I stated that I would love Sonic Team to give the adventure formula another shot since I still think it had a lot of potential. But Sonic Lost World for the Wii U doesn't feel like that step in the right direction the formula needed. It goes back to a time where Sonic games weren't all about speed, while at the same time losing its identity in the process. Sonic Lost World is by no means a bad game, I just don't think it's a very good Sonic game. I'd recommend you approach this one with caution. As I've stated earlier, I can only hope that future games in the lineup build upon what worked in Sonic Lost World and truly create an experience I can enjoy again and again. I got a feeling this is going to be one of the most polarizing Sonic games in the franchise's history, but I guess only time will tell for that one. And to all those that plan on getting the game, I hope you have a better overall experience than I did for both versions. Well, I hope that was the answer you guys were looking for. But thank you guys for watching, have yourself a good night, and take care.
You idiots! These are not them! You've captured their stunt doubles!